Alright, Martha, today we're going to have a quick lesson on how to speak with different vocal inflections. It's very important when you read a story to change the way you speak. It actually helps you understand the story better. So today we're going to be reading Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. Alright, I'm going to start out by modeling how I would like you to read. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. "The very place to spend the night," quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped.
Next morning they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite.
Alright, Martha, I'm going to stop you right there. One thing you can do to help improve your reading is when you come to these little marks here, quotation marks they're called, it means that someone's speaking. So what voice could you use for Mr. Mallard?
"Good morning,"
That works. Good morning. Alright, continue.
quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast better than the first.
Alright, that's very good. But how about on this page, try and change the tone of your voice a little bit. Go up and down with your voice so you sound a little bit more exciting.
"I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard, as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in the pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?"
That's very good. I like how you raise your voice at the end when you saw a question mark. When we ask a question, our voice goes up, right? Alright, continue.
"Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. "But look out," squawked Mrs.
Oh,
Mallard.
you can't say it like that. You have to say, "Look out!"
"Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over!" And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies, with all those horrid things rushing about. We'll have to look somewhere else."
And remember, when you come across a text feature of any kind, you have to read it. So even though the text is ended on the top of the page, there's something else at the bottom. Can you say that out loud?
Weep.
Good job. It's good to get in the habit of reading all the text features because they offer us clues as to what's happening in the story. Alright, well, so they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there.
One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, and then Lack, then Mack and Knack, and a whack, and pack, and quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard.
Now, how would she say that? Don't you worry.
"Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children," and she did.
That's right. It's good that you model what the adult said. It's very good. That's what you're supposed to do.